All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Cameron Riesenberger, and I am a reference librarian with the St. Louis County Library. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us for this virtual program, Legal Implications of Starting a Business, which is part of the Small Business and Nonprofit Expo that's been going on all week this week at our libraries and will continue until Friday. This program and webinar will be recorded. Microphones are muted and video cameras are turned off. The closed captioning function has been engaged. Just for your convenience, feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask questions, or you can put those in the chat as well. And we'll kind of get to those as they make sense, but hopefully we make sure we cover all of them. So our presenters for this program this morning are Marlene Elliott and Stephanie Strickland of Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Hello and welcome to you both, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. As already stated, my name is Stephanie Strickland, and I'm a staff attorney with the CED Micro Enterprise Program at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. And I'll just give you all just a brief introduction of what we do as an agency. As you can see on the screen, I hope you all can see my screen adequately. We are the largest civil nonprofit law firm in the region. We did just recently, last year, celebrate our 65th year anniversary. We have been providing, or we've had the honor and privilege of providing free legal assistance to over 1 million low-income individuals and families since 1956. We currently provide pro bono legal services related to a number of areas of law. I listed some of those areas. I specifically work with our micro enterprise program, where we do provide free legal services, transactional legal services for aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as nonprofits. And what we do in our program is we are often able to help small businesses and nonprofits avoid legal problems before they get started. And I hope to discuss some of those legal considerations today. We work with individuals on a range of issues such as entity formation or getting their business started. If they're a non-for-profit, we may help them apply for their tax exempt status. We review and draft commercial contracts and leases, advise on intellectual property, as well as employment law issues. As I said, we do hope that providing these services will help small businesses to avoid time-consuming legal problems, as well as help them grow. One of the things that we do is conduct workshops such as the one that we are conducting today. We do provide some one-on-one legal representation to individuals that qualify. And we also do some legal information and screening clinics during our office hours.
Hey, Stephanie, I
Yes.
see a request to see if you can present in full screen, but I don't know if that's how the screen translates, because it looks like a smaller version of.
How does that, did that work? What I just did there?
Mm.
You say you're looking at a smaller version of the presentation?
Yeah, it's like we can see a caption of your computer. I don't even know if you can really change that. So
can you see the full, you can't see the full screen? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, it's like we can see all of your tabs and stuff. So I think it's showing your computer. It's just the way that the sharing of the screen is showing. I don't
How
know.
about that?
That's better. There you go.
Okay. Now,
That's about as best.
there we go. If I can get it, there we go. Now, how's that look?
Good.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I wasn't sure if that was distracting to have that over to the side. It does make for a smoother transition on my end where I can just click on the next slide. So if you all don't mind bearing with me as I scroll down like this, it's not as pretty and clean, but it works. So
there's a thumbs up. They all like what you just
excellent, excellent. So some of the legal issues that we'll just covered today, some of the things that I think that small businesses need to consider. First and foremost is what type of entity you want to have. One of the things that we talk to a lot of people about is, what do you want to have, a nonprofit? Do you want to have a for-profit? Sometimes people aren't quite sure. And in making that decision, it really just depends on what's the purpose of your organization. If the purpose is a charitable purpose and you're not seeking to make profit, then you would want to possibly start a nonprofit. But there are a bunch of legal considerations that go along with that we can briefly talk about. And if anyone has specific questions about that, we can try to discuss that a little bit further. There are also legal implications when you are selecting a name for your business. You want to first, make sure that you're not using the exact same name that someone else is using in the same line of business, for example. Other things are, if you're considering partnering with someone else, are you going it alone, or is it going to be more than one individual that's running the business? If there's more than one individual, there are different legal considerations. You want to make sure that you have an agreement in writing to avoid disputes later on down the road. And then, of course, how will your business operate? That's something that you need to decide, whether you are I was going to say either sole proprietor, or whether you are a sole member of an LLC. You still have to have in writing how your business is going to operate. And you would put that in a document that we'll discuss momentarily. Do I have any questions at this point, Marlene, about just basically what we're going to cover?
No,
Anything like that?
So do you
Okay.
want questions during, or do you want to wait till the end?
I'm open to, like, if it makes sense, if there's something that I don't want to leave any knowledge gaps. So if there's a big question that relates to what I'm talking about in the moment, I don't mind addressing that. But for the most part, we can save questions at the end. I like to just kind of make sure everyone's tracking sometimes and just check in and see if we have any questions.
Okay, if I see a burning question that needs further explanation, I'll jump in and say something.
Thank you. So as I already kind of talked about that for-profit versus a nonprofit. And like I said, we can flesh it out a little bit more, but I bring that up and I always talk about that at this phase, because again, I sometimes get a lot of people that come in and they have a lot of ideas, and it seems like they want a not-for-profit, but they also want to make money. And, when you have a not-for-profit, you cannot necessarily make a profit. Okay, you can conduct some activities that are revenue generating, but as long as it's going back to that charitable purpose, that doesn't run afoul of what a nonprofit is. But if your primary interest is in making the big bucks, then you're going to want to make sure that you are a for-profit entity. And then you also want to decide if you even want to register your business. You can conduct business without registering as an LLC or some other formal entity type. You can operate as a sole proprietor. When making these decisions, there are a number of different things to consider. You get more protection when you file as an LLC. So it just kind of depends on what you're doing, maybe what type of risk you're taking when engaging in that business, to decide whether or not to register your business. Those are the types of things that you're going to think about when deciding on what type of entity you want to register. Next, your taxation. Taxation is a big thing. So the way you're taxed as an LLC is a lot more flexible if you decide to go LLC as opposed to registering as a corporation. Okay, most people that we get coming to us for services are either going to be sole proprietors, meaning they're operating without being formally registered, or they're looking for LLC so that they can avoid personal liability if there were any harm or damage to arise out of the business that they conduct. So that's a big reason why you may want to consider registering as an LLC as opposed to just operating as a sole proprietor, because if you get sued as a sole proprietor, then you're personally liable. Taxation is huge. I definitely recommend that people consult with not only an attorney, but with an accountant. If you're, especially if you are looking at trying to do something like S Corp. I've been getting a lot of people that talk about a S corporation as opposed to LLC or your formal corporation that has a lot more regulation than LLCs as well. So if you're looking for a simpler business model, a lot of times the LLC works for people. So that's something to take into consideration. The management and control of your business, you want to consider those things. You want to think about how, if you are starting off on your own or just you and one other person, you want to address how would we go about bringing in additional partners or potentially getting rid of a partner if things aren't working out. I also have listed here just the ability to transfer ownership or continuation of business. Those are all things that you will address in your business documents, particularly your operating agreement. And we will get into that a little bit later. So I just kind of have a chart here of the most common types of business entities. I already talked a little bit about what a sole proprietor is. It's just an individual doing business. Even if this is something I want to point out to everyone, even if you decide not to register as an LLC or as a formal entity type, if you're doing business by any name other than your own name, you want to make sure you do something called a DBA or fictitious name registration. That is a huge thing because it is actually a violation of Missouri law to operate under any other name other than your own personal name without at least having filed this fictitious name registration. And that's essentially for accountability purposes. You can't just make, have a name that you're operating under and then people aren't able to like trace you or find you anywhere if they need to either, send you documents, sue you primarily. I hate to always bring up getting sued, but, that's always a risk when you're running a business. But that's something that's important if you're going to operate as a sole proprietor and do business under a name other than your own legal given name. Partnerships, that's another type of business entity, and your limited liability companies. Now, I don't generally in presentations get into corporations as much. As I said, they normally require much more maintenance than most small businesses are ready for. Okay, there are certain aspects that people find advantages in, but again, I always recommend to consult with an attorney if you are both an attorney and an accountant, if that's what you're thinking about doing, because you have a little less flexibility when it comes to taxation. So I'll just kind of briefly go over the entity types if I haven't already done that, which I tend to get ahead of myself sometimes. But some of the downfalls to operating as a sole proprietorship, meaning it's just you. Let's imagine you have a lemonade stand. So I got a picture of lemonades here, is that you have unlimited liability for any business debt. One of the most advantageous things about operating as a sole proprietor, however, is that there's no formal action that's necessary to operate in that way. So I could, go and start my lemonade stand and stand out front and sell my lemonade. And I don't have to do anything in order to do that. But if I am going to if I'm going to call that business a name and I'm advertising under that name and things like that, I need to do my DBA. You do have complete control over your business. But the thing is if something were to happen to you tomorrow, then that's when your business would, if you died tomorrow, your business dies with you, okay? And so some people want succession planning and they want things in place for their business to carry on if they're no longer able to operate that business. And this page just kind of summarizes what I just said, but one of those benefits that I didn't mention was the pass-through taxation. That means that you can file your business income on your personal income tax. You don't have to file separately for the business. And so that, again, is just a convenience that a lot of people like to have. It makes things a lot less complicated. I still always recommend that people keep their business funds separate from their personal funds in that case. But it's easy to form and maintain. And you have lots of flexibility when you do things that way. You don't have to, if you're going to change the way you run your business, you don't have to go back and change your documents as you would if you have an LLC or another more formal type of entity.
Hey,
The other,
Stephanie.
oh, sure, go right ahead.
Sorry. I thought I caught you at the right time, but I didn't. But there was just a question. I think as a sole proprietor, when to file your fictitious name, can you explain that a little bit again, like the personal name versus the business name? I put it in the chat, but I realized that this is a recording, so I don't know if putting it in the chat will help people, who view the recording.
Okay, thank you. And okay, so you put the answer in the chat and I see that now. So when you bring it to my attention, I can click and see that. But as Marlene said, before you begin operating, it's the time that you want, before you begin operating under a name other than your own, is the time that you want to file that DBA. Okay, so before you start operating as Stephanie's Lemonade or whatever the name of your business is going to be, you want to file that fictitious name registration before you start doing business. Is that, hopefully that answers your question?
Well, that and all that was a good addition to what I said. I think I just pointed out, like, if you're doing business under your personal name, then you don't have to file for a fictitious name because your name is
Exactly.
not fictitious. Marlene Elliott, Marlene Elliott. If I'm doing business as Marlene Elliott, then I don't have to file for a fictitious name. But if there's anything else like Stephanie's Lemonade or Marlene's, hair salon, then that's a fictitious name and you'll need to file a fictitious name registration with the Secretary of State.
Right. Thank you, Marlene. And so what I'll add to the other drawback for having a sole proprietorship is that it can be difficult if you're looking to get investments into your business. That can be difficult when you're operating as a sole proprietor. Investors like to see some type of, first of all, they don't want you to have that unlimited personal liability. They want you to have a lot more protection. They want to know that there's maybe some longevity in the business and that that there are systems in place. So that's one drawback to operating a sole proprietorship. But again, if I'm doing a lemonade stand, I'm not necessarily looking for investments, and that's not part of my business. It's not a necessary part of my business model. So that would not be a consideration in that type of case. Okay, here it is again. The fictitious name that we're talking about, we've already discussed what it is and when you need it. You do register with the Secretary of State. It's called the Missouri Secretary of State's office. I believe it's sos.mo.gov, and I think we even have a slide that has that website. But when you file a fictitious name, the important thing to know is that it is only good for 5 years. So you will have to renew your fictitious name at 5 years. If you don't, then it expires and it's no longer active. The other thing is that you don't get any exclusive rights to your name when you are just operating as a fictitious name. So that's something to think about as well. Okay. So one of the things that you want to do when forming your entity, whether it's a fictitious name or otherwise, is make sure that that name isn't already taken. One way that you can do that on your own is do a simple Google search. That's the first thing that a lot of people will do, because not only will it tell you about businesses in Missouri, it'll just kind of let you know maybe about the creativity of your name. If you see a bunch of businesses operating under that very exact or very similar name, then that may be a sign for you like, I don't think I want to find something a little more unique. But particularly as it relates to Missouri and whether there are any other businesses operating in Missouri under that name, you can search on the Secretary of State's website whether or not that is a business name that is already registered. Okay. Now, the other cool thing about a fictitious name is that it's relatively cheap to file. It's $7, I believe, to file that online, and just a very small nominal fee if you're using your debit or credit card. I think they also take checking accounts as well. They call it e-checks. So yes, here is the website. It is, I was off. It's bsd.sos.mo.gov. Okay. So when you go, now, here's the thing about this website. They kind of update it I feel like every year, maybe every couple of years. So this screen is the way it looks at the bottom, but it just kind of changes, the layout changes, but really easy to go to. You create an account. If you want to do this online, you can also go to this website, print the forms off, and send it in if that is your preference. But a lot of people like to take advantage of filing online. A lot of times those fees are lower as well. And this is just kind of pointing out what it looks like. So you know that you would just click on register your fictitious name. You'll see that there are other options. You can use the same process to renew your fictitious name if you want to correct it, if you want to cancel it, because you've decided that you are either getting out of that business and starting some other type of business, or you're formally going to start operating. You can just cancel your fictitious name and file your LLC. And so this is what the page looks like when you're going in there. You can, where it says here at the bottom of the screen where it says new filing, when you first go in there, it actually gives you an option to check the name. So you could just type in whatever your fictitious name is there and check on that at first, and it'll tell you right then and there whether it's taken. So, you know, you can do that a couple of different ways. One thing to know when you're filing your DBA, as well as when you're filing other documents with the Secretary of State, is to make sure that when you are if you're going to use a P.O. box, which a lot of people choose to use. Why? Because the address that you use when you register is going to be public. So if you're operating a home-based business, and you decide to use your home address as your principal office, that's going to show on your organizational documents. So a lot of people don't want that. A lot of people didn't know that if they did this on their own, and that's just there. And there's no way you can take it off, and it's very frustrating for a lot of people. So if you haven't already formed your business, you're ahead of the game, and you can avoid that by getting a P.O. box. But if you get one, you have to make sure that it has a street address for the first line. It can't just start off P.O. box 356 and then you go to the city. Most of the post offices are giving P.O. boxes that has a street address here. Then you can put the P.O. box on the second line. Otherwise, it will not let you file it like that. So I just like to point that out to individuals. Make sure that you list all owners. When you are filing your DBA, you want to make sure that you click whether, this is another good thing to point out. You see here at the top where it says whether the owner is an individual, whether the owner is an organization. Again, if it's just yourself, Okay, and you're going to be the person who's operating under a fictitious name. You're going to click owner as individual. But I have had folks come to us. I've had nonprofits. I've had other businesses come to us that want to start some other line of business that may not necessarily be related to the first business, or they have a really catchy name that they like and that they would like to operate that line of business under. You can make your business or your existing LLC or nonprofit the owner of the DBA. In that case, you would select owner is organization. Make sure if there's more than one owner that you list the percentage of ownership. You see that over here where it says 100. If it's one person, you just make sure you put 100. But if it's more than one person, you need to put what's the percentage of ownership. So a lot of people will do 50-50, but in other cases, some individuals might do a different arrangement. For example, when someone is investing more money into the business, you all may agree that they will have a larger ownership interest in that business. But the important thing is to make sure that that ownership adds up to 100%, no matter what. And when you're reviewing your information, again, this is just, we just like to show it because some people just like to have the visual of what it is supposed to look like. They will give you this page to kind of show you all the information that you've entered. You review it. You see something wrong. Oh, I put the wrong address. You just click update and correct that. Okay. So moving on from that particular entity type, you can enter into a partnership with someone and still not legally register a business. Okay, so again, you can think of that same lemonade stand concept, but it's two or more people. It's the same type of downfall, such as the partners all being personally liable for all business debts and obligations. Okay, but that's also complicated a little bit more when you're dealing with more than one person. So the big thing, if you're going to have a partnership that you don't want to register as an LLC or other type of entity, is to have a partnership agreement that will spell out who all has what responsibilities. So that's the biggest legal consideration if you're considering entering into a partnership with someone. So again, it's not a distinct legal entity. Each partner can bind the business to a contract or a business deal. Now, and I'll just say here, you can put it in your partnership agreement if you want it to be that both partners must, sign contracts or something like that. But those are important details because just by default, either one can bind the partnership. So you want to make sure that you have all of those important details of how you want that partnership to run laid out in your partnership agreement. Each partner, again, can file their business income and expenses on their individual personal income tax return. That's that pass-through taxation that we talked about with the sole proprietorship. Same type of benefits. It's easy to form and maintain. However, some of the drawbacks are that the disagreements that can arise if you don't have a well-written partnership agreement. And even with the best written partnership agreement, that doesn't mean that partners are always going to agree on things. So instead of it just being you making, all decisions, we know that can be complicated when it's more than one person that's making the decision. Okay. If a partner dies or leaves or withdraws, that partnership dissolves. So that's another drawback to that. Okay, so again, we talked about creating that partnership agreement. The biggest things to make sure it's signed and dated by all the partners, describe and list who does what in the business, how much money and assets each person will give to the business. That's something important to lay out if you all are both going in with nothing. That and maybe something different, but when you're starting a business, it always takes something. So it doesn't matter how little or how much you want to put those things in the partnership agreement. You definitely want to lay out how profits will be paid out and how debts will be covered. And then what will happen when the business closes. You can make arrangements for a little bit of succession. I already said that when one person leaves, it dissolves, but you can contract otherwise. So, if there's someone else that they want that to go to, I think it gets a little hairy. So you want to think about, do you want to have to be in a partnership with someone else's heirs? That's something you want to think about in the beginning when you're making those decisions and putting it in the partnership agreement. I feel like that's a good place to ask Marlene if there's anything that's come up, any questions at this time.
I'm so sorry, but my computer just zonked out and I just joined again. So it erased everything that I was seeing in the chat. So
okay, no worries. I just pulled it up and doesn't look like we have any new things. So that's
okay, good.
Sounds good. Okay. So on to the limited liability. I feel like I've already kind of given you guys a little bit. I've talked a lot about limited liability companies, but we'll just overview. Flexible ownership and management structure. A limited liability company is going to be managed by the members, which that's another word for owners, or a manager that's chosen by the members. That's a big thing. Like I'd like to point out for individuals who may have already filed their business registration, because you can, and it's relatively simple, but I think a lot of people get confused at that part because the owner or the person who's filing at that time may look at themselves as, oh, okay, I'm the manager of the business, so I'm gonna click that it's manager run. Well, that's really referring more to if you're going to hire someone else to run the business and you're more of like a passive owner. So if you have already done that and you realize that that's not correct, you can always go back and correct or amend your original articles of organization. But one of the other good things about this is that you have the benefit of that pass-through taxation. Okay, you also, you're going to file this through the Secretary of State's office. There's not a bunch of ongoing formalities as there is if you decide to form a corporation. Okay, there's no personal liability if you form and maintain your LLC properly. Okay, that's the biggest benefit. And I think that's really important, especially if you're in a products type of driven industry, or just any type of industry where someone that could get hurt or someone is taking your products and something could happen. You just want to think ahead of those things and try to avoid those problems or limit the way those problems will affect you by, limiting your personal liability. So we talked a lot about the benefits, but some of the drawbacks can be that the tax filings can get a little complicated if you have several members. So that's why it's important to make sure that you have an accountant that you consult with that can tell you all how to properly do your tax filings if it's more than one LLC member. And I've listed it as a drawback, but it's just one extra step you have to take. But if you want to transfer your ownership interest, it just requires some planning and putting that in your operating agreement on how you would go about doing that. So it's not really the biggest deal in the world. I should probably even remove that for drawbacks, but I just like to point out that that's something to take into consideration, whether you are a sole member LLC or if it's more than one member. And this type of registration is going to be achieved by going to the exact same website. Okay. the first thing, like I said, once you create your account and you click that you are going to create an LLC, the very first box that pulls up allows you to check that name availability. Now, we talked about, and let's see, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but yeah, I'll talk about it here because I don't have a full slide on this. But when you are checking the name, we talked about Google. We talked about checking on the Secretary of State's website. But the reason that that can be important is because of something we call intellectual property rights. So if someone is operating a business under the same name that you are thinking about operating under, you have to consider whether or not you are infringing on someone else's intellectual property, okay? It's not the simplest assessment, but just some of the things or legal considerations that you want to think about as it relates to that is, first, are you all in the same line of business? Is there some likelihood of confusion? Could someone get your business confused with their business? And it's not always a cut and dry answer, but the biggest things to look at, like I said, is are you all in the same line of business? If you're both in the same line of business, same or even similar name, even a similar name could be viewed as being confusing if it sounds the same, if it looks the same, and you all are in the exact same line of business. I like to use that McDowell's example with this. If anyone's seen Coming to America, we all saw the whole McDowell's thing. And when I think about that, I really always wonder, and I'm almost sure they probably cleared that with McDonald's because that is so close. Like that would definitely be something that to think about. You know, in their case,
I have to say, no, he was in trouble with McDonald's because of the photographer who was taking pictures. He was saying McDonald's people always sending people to take pictures.
Exactly. So, you know, that's just a good example I like to think about, because you're like, oh no, it's not the same. We're different. We've got different colors, but you saw how there was so much of the marketing that was similar to McDonald's, like I don't know if it was one art. They said they have the golden arch, or they had something else, but whatever it was very, very similar. So I can almost guarantee you, if you started a restaurant like that and it was just so similar, you're going to get a cease and desist letter from McDonald's, because they're going to say, this is too close. You're taking advantage of our brand, and people could potentially get you confused with our brand. So that's a huge legal consideration. It's just looking at those types of things and just trying to get a strong start. And you don't want to start off with problems, because we all know that marketing, it takes quite a bit. You know, most people that I meet, they put a lot of time and pride into the name of their business. And so I hate to see people do that and then not really do that due diligence, and later on find out that there are potentially problems, okay? So that was a lot to say about name availability, but that is just kind of a huge legal consideration to think about. But you want to think about how long, one of the things that you put on this form, this is more so getting into the meat of how you register your business. I wanted to talk to you all a little bit more about, like I said, the legal implications, but so I probably won't spend as much time on stuff like this, but I will point out that you will click either perpetual, or you want to list the end date. If this is some type of business venture that you're entering into and you know it's temporary, then you can put that on there and your business will dissolve at that end date, okay? The entity purpose, though, that's something big to think about, because you want to keep that purpose general. The reason you want to keep your entity purpose general, and when I say general, that means you're saying something like to operate any and all legal business in the state of Missouri. Now, some people might say, well, that's not my purpose. I want to get into what my mission is. I want to put all of that, and you can do that, But if you do that, I always say add that general clause at the end. And the reason I say that is because if you later on decide to start conducting another type of business, or if you just say, you know what, I'm going to branch off and I'm going to expand and I'm going to start doing this over here as well, your limited liability protection will not extend to that additional activity if you put a narrow purpose. So that's big. You want to make sure that you have a general purpose as possible so that you're always protected with that limited liability. Okay. This is just, again, showing you what it looks like, just what the database looks like when you go in there to file. So I'll kind of go past this a little bit, but it's called Articles of Organization for Limited Liability Company, domestic. Okay. There's another type if you already had a business in another state and you're now operating here, you have to register as a foreign entity. So that's just kind of sidebar to think about. Okay. So once you've gotten your legal entity created, the next thing that you want to think about as far as just businesses, no, this isn't for nonprofits, this is just for LLCs. You need that document that's called the operating agreement. That is the document that is going to lay out how your business is structured. It also outlines things like the financial and functional decision-making that can be very important, particularly if you have more than one member or owner. Banks will often ask for this document as well. This document is not on the Secretary of State's website. It's a document that you would have an attorney draft for you. I've had people come to me that have had these documents drafted other types of ways. I would say be careful with things like LegalZoom, because they're going to give you a very general type of document that may not address all of your needs. That's the biggest thing that I would point out with going that route. But you definitely want to make sure that your document is tailored to your specific needs. Okay, and once that document is signed by each member or owner, that serves as a binding set of rules to adhere to. You would keep this document in your personal business documents, like say you don't file it with the state, but it becomes important a lot of times, either when you have investors sometimes want to see this, banks sometimes want to see this because they want to see, are you authorized to be making the financial decisions that you're making right now? So all of that would be set out in your operating agreement. This agreement is it's gonna cover, like I said, a number of things. These are the main elements, mainly who are the owners, what's their right and duties, whether it's going to be member or managed, whether the members are putting capital contributions or money into the business and how much. And then most importantly, this is the part that you want to have in there, particularly for your bank when you're going in there and withdrawing money out of your business account. How will the profits and losses be shared and distributed? That's also really important when you have more than one member, because yeah, you guys don't want to be like, okay, you took all the money out. We are a 2-member LLC. Now, how do I get my payout? So you need to address that in your operating agreement. And then last, dissolution, and that's just under what circumstances can the business be dissolved or ended. Okay. Again, I kind of already talked about why we need it, but I think it really helps lay out how the organization will be taxed, or how you choose to be taxed, because you do get that pass-through taxation. You would want to put that in the operating agreement, whether the members can file their income on their personal income taxes, or whether you all have decided to do your taxes otherwise. Again, you base that decision on the feedback of an accountant. But again, it's just going to have all that basic information. How do we bring in new members? How do we get members out? Yeah, I think I already pretty much said who a member is, so I'll skip this slide unless anyone has questions about what a member is. But again, it's just an owner and a party who has signed that operating agreement, or someone who subsequently admitted as a member in accordance with that operating agreement. You want to decide, whether your members will have, if you're going to have to vote on certain matters, you want to put all of that in that agreement, similar to that partnership agreement. This stuff becomes important, of course, when you have more than one member who is managing the LLC. Okay. How the ownership is divided. Although you put it on your articles of organization, you want to put that in the operating agreement as well. Okay, I know we're running kind of low on time. So again, I feel like this is getting really more into the details of the operating agreement, but hopefully I've already kind of imparted, what the biggest and most important parts of that. But I will say one of those clauses that's really important is talking about member liability. It's already an LLC. You already have personal liability limited if you all are maintaining that LLC the way you're supposed to, but make it clear in that agreement that members are not liable jointly or severally for any debts or obligations of the company. Okay, just solely by reason of being a member. So that's a good clause to put in those types of agreements. Okay. All right. So some of those other legal considerations to think about. If you are selling products, you want to make sure that you are registered with the state of Missouri, that you're registered with the county, and that you're registered federally. So very similar to how when we have income from an employer, and I know if you look at your W-2, you see you're getting federal taxes taken out, you're getting state taxes. It's the same thing for a business. So you have to make sure that first you get your EIN, and you can do that free on irs.gov. And that's basically like a social security number for your business. It's called an EIN. Okay. Your state taxes, you don't always have to register. If you're selling products, you definitely do. If you have employees, you definitely do. But then I noticed that there are some municipalities that may ask you for your state tax ID, okay? So in a lot of cases that people do go ahead and get that state tax ID number as well, but it's absolutely necessary if you're selling products and if you have employees. One of the reasons for when you have employees, you have to take taxes out of their checks. The reason you have to register when you're selling products is because you have to charge sales tax on your products. And so the state traces all of that. And then of course there's your county taxes. It says county, but whether you're in St. Louis City or St. Louis County, you're going to need to register for your business personal property tax registration. That is generally an annual assessment. There's normally a minimum assessment. The fee is different between the county and the city. I believe it's somewhere between $100 and $200. But that is you paying taxes for your business, essentially. Okay. If you're selling things, then, that's also going to help them track how much you owe them for your sales tax. Licensing is really important. It's important to make sure that you get a business license wherever you will be operating from. Even if you're operating from your home, those procedures vary based on the municipality that you live in. If you live in unincorporated St. Louis County, then you're pretty lucky because you probably are not going to have to get a business license. But if you live in Hazelwood, if you live in Florissant, they all have business licenses that are required for you to obtain prior to operating. I've had plenty of people who've come to me that were already operating and may not have been aware of that, but you just get that registration done as soon as possible. And what they will do is that they will back tax you sometimes, or back charge on these fees. Okay, you said I've been operating since 2019. Well, they may make you pay a fee and go back and charge for those years. It depends on the municipality. So I would definitely talk to them about those things. There are some businesses that require you to have special licenses, such as an occupational license. That would be occupations and businesses like beauty salons, restaurants, daycares. If you are selling liquor, you got to have a liquor license. So yes, so these are all things that you want to look into. If you have questions about it and you don't know and you're concerned about that, reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to us and say you have questions about what type of licenses you may require. That's the kind of thing we do assist people with here at Legal Services. So this is just giving you a big picture of the other types of legal issues that can come up when you're running a business. Of course, there's always going to be contracts. Anytime you're providing services, it's good to have a service agreement so that you have in writing what you're providing, how much it is, put your cancellation policies and things like that in that document. Have a lawyer review those documents. A lot of people find really good documents, boilerplate type documents online. But of course, the best way is to have someone someone, meaning an attorney, review those contracts that you plan on using. If you're employing people, those are very specific legal issues. And again, we do advise individuals on the types of things they need to be aware of. You have many obligations as an employer. So if you're going to be employing people, that often triggers other obligations, such as providing benefits, or definitely making sure that you're taking taxes out of the paycheck, workers' compensation. It's just a number of things that can come up. These are just, like I said, the types of things that you want to keep in mind. The biggest thing as it relates to contracts, real estate issues, is to make sure that you're signing all contracts in your business's name and not in your personal capacity. So at the end of a contract, sure, you can sign your name, but you're going to make sure that you put member of, name or owner in the name of your business, so that it's clear that you're signing and contracting in the name of the business. Real estate issues that come up that's normally when a person is going to be leasing or purchasing a space. It's always recommended that you have an attorney review that lease with you, especially if you have questions about any of the clauses. I've seen so many people just sign those leases in their own name without even really reading. And then there's problems later on as to who is responsible for what in a building. And remember, your rent's going to be due, even if everything wasn't the way you were hoping that it would be. But that's why it's important to review that lease and to make sure that your needs will be met, or at least your expectations will be set. And you can always negotiate with the lease. You don't have to just sign a lease because that's the space you like and it's available. Never sell yourself short in that respect. So always feel free to try to negotiate. If there's certain aspects that you don't agree with, talk to that person, the landlord, before you sign, to see if they can make changes or if you can negotiate certain things in your leases. All right. So I think we're to the end. Do we have any questions? I know we're running very short on time, but I just kind of have a slide up right now that, again, just kind of summarize some issues that can come up when you're starting a business. And hopefully I've addressed in general most of these issues.
Yeah, I think you have, Stephanie. I've been answering questions in the chat. I'll just kind of briefly go over it because, yeah. First was a question about the LLC article purpose and
Mhm.
how general it should be. Should it be vague or should it be close enough to your business that you're adding? And I basically said, you want to keep it general, but you can also add in, what you actually do and then add the general statement. So I said, your purpose can be as general as to transact any business that is legal under Missouri law. Or you can
Mhm.
say to operate a barbershop and to transact any business that is legal under Missouri law. The general statement allows you to change your business type without having to amend your LLC articles. So if you change your business from running a barbershop to running just a general hair salon or a class, you don't have to amend your LLC because of that general statement.
Mhm.
And then someone was asking about the operating agreement and whether it be separate from the business plan. And I said, yes, the operating agreement is separate from the business plan. It's required by law and it spells out how you will manage your business. And I said, sort of like the bylaws of a nonprofit or a corporation. It's just the LLC version of bylaws, if you will.
Mhm.
And I said that there's some general versions of operating agreements online. You can find a free version and tailor it. But Cameron said that they have sample business plans and operating agreements at the library, which I did not
Excellent.
know. Exactly. I'm like, awesome. So go to the library, people, and I'm going to go too. And someone asked, do you need a license for a lawn care business? And I said, there might be requirements for that. I don't know. There might be requirements for that, but you'll have to do some research to find out, in the line of business that you want to run, you want to do your background research to find out if you need licensing or a certificate, or if there's stuff out there that you can get that can just impress your customers. You
Mhm.
may want to be like, well, I've got this such and such, it sounds more
Right.
official. But either way, you will want to do your research to make sure you're in line with what is the typical business practice.
And just to add to that, as far as I know, it's not a special license that you would need for a lawn care business, but you do want to make sure you get a business license. Even though with lawn care, you're probably going all over, but the business license application is going to depend on where you're operating from. So that means, where's your principal office? Where are you? Yeah, so if you're home based, if you don't have a physical office, you're home based. And so you need to apply for a business license either in your municipality or if you're in the city of St. Louis with the city of St. Louis. The other thing I would point out is if you're keeping equipment at your house, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that is relevant to that business personal property registration I was telling you about. That equipment is that's something that may be taxed. Okay, and I can't tell you like exactly how much it's going to be taxed. And I don't want to scare you and make you think that it's something astronomical. But on that business personal property form, they're really good about laying out the type of equipment. I think they may ask stuff like how large it is or how much space it's taking up. They have ways of calculating the tax on things like business equipment, as well as inventory. That also applies to inventory if you sell products. So just keep that in mind, that those are things that you may end up having to put down on your business personal property registration, may be covered by that annual fee that we talked about, but it could result in a slightly higher tax, but nothing that's not manageable. And I think that puts us right at noon. I want to thank everyone for coming and listening to our presentation today. If you have any further questions, feel free to email us at ced@lsem.org. If you find that you need more extended individual representation, or you just have some questions, we may be able to set up a time to talk to you to see if you qualify for our services.
All
And
right.
welcome aboard.
Thank you both so much for the great presentation. We both all learned a lot, I think. I was going to jump in here to wrap us up. I put 2 links in the chat for you. One is to fill out a library card application. The library has lots of resources that can help you support your business. Most of them do require a library card to access them, so that's why I put that in there. If you fill that out, we'll mail you a card and then you'll get it pretty soon. The other link is a survey for this presentation. If you fill it out, you'll be entered into a raffle for a $25 gift card. So just please go ahead and click that link and fill that out for our presenters and the library for this entire expo. But let's say thank you again to Stephanie and Marlene. It was a really great presentation, and we really appreciate you being here during the Business and Nonprofit Expo.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.